Tryon, right down the middle, and this is Trade. And those were, for a long time, the only streets Charlotte had. And it derives, Trade Street got its name from the trading path, because this was one of the routes that people would take up to Philadelphia to exchange their goods for money and other things that they might need in Philadelphia. And they also could take this route all the way down to Charleston to do the same kind of thing. Now, Tryon Street, or as we explain to people when they have trouble spelling it, they always want to call it Tyrone Street. That's like try on, like you try on something, because no one knows who Tryon is. But anyway, he was a royal governor during the early, mid 1700s, and then went on up to New York. So these are the early street names. For a long time, if you do any Charlotte history, you won't see Alexander Street or Brevard Street or C Street or College Street or Davidson. They were A, B, C, and D. There's no E, F, and G, just A, B, C, D. And sometime in the 1880s, they changed it to these names because College Street, there was a female institute, and the Presbyterian College was right down the street at the corner of 9th and College, or 9th and C Streets. And it was that was the precursor to Presbyterian College. To Queens College. Oh. With me? And D Street, there's lots of Davidsons. So that's one way. And then for a long time, Mint Street, still in use, but for a long time, there was a branch of the United States Mint. It opened up in 1837. This building was moved to Randolph Road and was renamed the Mint Museum of Art. And this is what it looked like before they remodeled. So if you go to the Mint, you'll sort of see some of the architectural features, but not too many. There was a fire and it burnt, and I think the eagle was the only thing that lasted. But when they moved it, they had to number all the bricks and put it back together again when they got to Randolph Road. And Mary Dwelly, Mary Myers Dwelly, or was it Mary Springs Dwelly? Mary Myers Spring Dwelly. She was related to a lot of folks. Anyway, she raised the money to do that. So that's how we finally got an art museum. Now, Church Street uptown gets its name from First Presbyterian Church. At one time, there was just a regular church. It wasn't any denomination, but any religion could use the building, and it was located on Church Street. And when Lord Selwyn donated the 360 acres to Mecklenburg County, he allowed it for a courthouse, stocks. That's when you put people in stocks, if you've heard of that, and a jail. And they set a little lot for a church in the cemetery. So the little cemetery that's right behind Presbyterian, it's called Settlers Cemetery. That's where the early settlers are buried. That's what they're referring to. And other church, you will see lots of church names, roads. There's Rocky River Road. There's Poplar Tent Road. There's Sugar Creek Road, Providence Road, Steel Creek Road, Philadelphia Road. All of those roads got their name from the churches that were built on those roads.
Were all those churches Presbyterian, that the roads were?
Yes. North in Charlotte, like in Salisbury, you'll find a good mixture of German and Scots-Irish. Same thing for Concord. But in Charlotte and in Mecklenburg County, even though we were named for a German princess, it was predominantly settled by Scots-Irish people who came down from Maryland. And as time, evolved, different immigrants came in. So these are the sister churches, but there are a lot of other Presbyterian churches, but that was the predominant religion for a very long time. There was never an Anglican or a Church of England. You would rarely see those east of probably Chapel Hill or Hillsborough. You would see west of Hillsborough, you just would not see Anglican churches or the Church of England. And one reason why is North Carolinians were too poor to pay a pastor. Originally in the 1600s and early 1700s, the most predominant religion was Quakers because they didn't require a minister to have to pay. In fact, a lot of the rectors who would come over from the Church of England complained about the fact that they can't pay me. Camp Green gave us, this was a World War I training camp that's just, it was west of the city. It wasn't even in the city limits at the time, but you're familiar with Remount Road, and there's some other roads out there, and Camp Green Road. And that's how that got its name, from that area. Remount was the area, they built these stables, and they housed horses, mules, and cows, and I think pigs. And the remount comes from, this is where we had the cavalry still in World War I. So the soldiers learned to remount their horses to learn the maneuvers to prepare to go into World War I. So that's how remount got its name. Colleges. Now, if you've ever gone down Trade Street and it suddenly becomes Elizabeth Avenue and you're not familiar with Charlotte's history, you're wondering, who's Elizabeth? Another queen? No. Where Presbyterian now sits was Elizabeth College, and it was an all-girls Lutheran women's college. They specialized in music education, and it was located on that whole area was a giant farm. You know, where the Independence Museum, Park is, right near Presbyterian, right off of Hawthorne. That was the city's reservoir. And before it was the city's reservoir, it was the part of the Torrance Farm. So the church, the Lutheran Church opened up a college there, and it was named after the daughter of the founder. And that building was taken over by Presbyterian Hospital when Elizabeth College merged with a school in Virginia. And part of that building, you can sort of see the outlines, but a lot of the original buildings are no longer there. Any questions? Everybody having fun? Now here we come with the Bible. This, as I explained earlier, it's from the Song of Solomon, I am the rose of Sharon and the lily of the valleys. So we have a lot of Sharons. But why do we have so many Sharons? Well, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, and it will be much to your amusement. Also, we have Carmel Road. Again, that's from the Bible. Now here is a map of Dilworth. Now, Dilworth was founded by Edward Latta Dilworth. And so he had Latta Park and he had Dilworth, and there's a lot of great names in that street, and he named that. So this was really the first time a developer in Charlotte was naming the streets. Now that's real common. If you want to know how streets get their names now, it's usually because the developer. I don't know if he goes down the family list of all his favorite books and favorite family members, I don't know, but it makes you wonder. So here are some names of some very familiar roads that we all travel down. And these are who people they were named after. William Cook Wilkinson, he was a local banker, and he was instrumental in the construction on what they used to call the Gaston Road. That's what it was called, the Gaston Road. And that's Wilkinson Boulevard, and that's what people from Charlotte would take to go down to Gaston County. Beatty's Ford Road was named after John Beatty. W.T. Harris, we all know Harris Grocery Store. Brookshire Freeway, John Brookshire, he was a former mayor. A. James Road, A. James was a wonderful school teacher, African-American school teacher, who just did a lot for that area. And I think there's a church named after her as well. Dilworth Road, of course, for Edward Dilworth Latta. Selwyn Avenue, that gets its name from Lord Augustus Selwyn. He was the land agent for Mecklenburg County back in the 1700s. He was the one who was selling the land and then picking up what they were called quick rents for the crown. So he was not the most popular person in the universe. Brevard Street is named for the Reverend Ephraim Brevard, one of the signers of the supposed Mech Day. That's another discussion. Caldwell Street was the Reverend David Caldwell, who was a very instrumental in the Revolutionary War. He was an inspired speaker. He got a lot of people involved in the whole movement for revolution in not only in Mecklenburg County, but in Guilford and Alamance County as well. Another minister was his father-in-law, the Reverend Alexander Craighead, and that's where Craighead gets its name. And Davidson was General William Lee Davidson, who was a Revolutionary War soldier, and he lost his life at the Battle of, well, it was over the Catawba River, so, and it wasn't real pretty. But,
Is that Brevard guy the same one that the city of Brevard is named for?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of Brevards. That's one of the early settler names. So this is another fun project we have when we're driving around in Charlotte. We're just driving. Oh, I'm on a different road. How did that happen? Let me go. And then next thing you know, you're on another road. The road's changed. The name has changed again. So these are just some of the examples of road. It's the same road, and you're going right down it merrily, and the next thing you know, it changes. And the really good thing about this was when I first moved here, I was given a tour of Charlotte, and the lady was the director of Maine, and she said, just remember the 4. And she just remembered, and she said, and Central becomes Kings, and Kings becomes Queens Road West. Well, I got lost coming back from visiting college friends off of Albemarle Road. Well, I got on the Central, and I was rejoiced. I started singing, Central becomes Kings, Kings becomes Queens Road West. I know where I am, and I can go home, because I lived off of Selwyn Avenue at the time. So it's just one of those things that really makes you happy when you're lost. First moved to Charlotte and you're lost.
So one of the big ones is like Wendover, Runnymede.
Yes.
Billy Graham.
It starts as Woodlawn, and it becomes Runnymede, and then it dead ends into Sharon Road West, and then you can go this way and it becomes Wendover, and then you go that way, it becomes Sharon Amity, and you're just like.
So why did they do that?
Okay, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
I'm holding out the best for last, because I find that the funniest. And then you'll also see roads named after waterways.
Oh, you missed the slide.
These,
You missed the slide. Forgotten communities.
I sure did. Thank you. This is one of my favorite. We have this really wonderful map, and I love this map. And it tells you where all these little communities were located in Mecklenburg County. And I just love that. And I think it's just sad that the only way we know they ever existed is, well, most people know Newell or Hickory Grove, but how many people knew that Rommel was a community, or Sardis? Of course, Sharon Township was very large and very active, but these are some of the forgotten communities that have streets named after them.
So quick
Caps
question.
Hill was a gold mine area.
Quick question. What do you mean by like communities? Are these like townships or like small villages, or?
They were probably just a group of farms around a post office, and they probably had a grist mill and maybe a store, a grocery store, but they were just small little pockets of populated areas that the name just disappeared as developers came into the area, and the communities that they remembered have, because a lot of people who are natives and down in Still Creek, they'll tell you about, it was like a little town all of its own. They can tell you where the stores were, and to them it was Still Creek. It was not Charlotte. And that's pretty much how they felt about it when they lived in these communities. I live in Sharon. I don't live in Charlotte. Billy Graham's people lived in the Sharon Township. Any more questions? Moving right along. Waterways. This is one of my favorite ones because Let me see if I can't get this. Nope. Nope, that's not going to work. I was trying to figure out if there was a way I could show the screen bigger, and I can't. But so as you can see, a lot of these creeks, they have been covered up, like Irwin Creek. They just have pipes, and you just see a street name for it or part of the creek. You can see for a little bit, and then some creeks. There's a lot of creeks. We get a lot of requests for deed search and help with the deed, because they say I can't find the creek anymore, and I'm like, it's covered up and piped, and they've built houses on top of it or nearby.
You can click on from current slide, it'll make it full screen.
Excuse me, I can't hear.
Upper left. Upper left.
Second.
No, from current slide, the next one up.
Current slide.
One. Yep.
Click on that.
There we go.
Ah,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
I'm so sorry. Now you can see better.
That's okay.
Okay. Now, these are mostly farm families. One or two are not. Well, about 4 or 5 are not. But on the left-hand side, most of those, Behringer was a Civil War general from Cabarrus County. And he married one of the Morrison sisters and was related to Stonewall Jackson. And his children, one of his children, established an automobile dealer, one of the first automobile dealerships in Osmond Behringer in Charlotte. And he rode a car up to the top of Grandfather Mountain. And we have a photograph of it. I don't know how, but he did. Belk, of course, is for the Belk family. Boyce, that was a family that's established here in the 1700s, down sort just below where Providence High School is. Brevard and Caldwell and Davidson we've talked about. Doolin is a very old family name. Graham is to Irwin's. Irwin High School in that area, there was a very wealthy man who lived there. His wife, Harriet Morrison Irwin, also one of the Morrison sisters. She was the first woman to have, I'm going to get this right, a U.S. patent for an architectural design by a woman in the country. She had designed sort of a heptagon style house. She said it was easier to maintain and clean, and she was sickly, and her house stood on Trade Street for a long time. It's based on that design. Alas, it is no more. Meyer Street, that was named for Captain Myers. And he owned the farm. John Myers, he owned the land where Myers Park is. That was his farm. He also donated land for the construction of Johnson C. Smith. Ray Road is for all the families down in there, as well as Spratt. Spratt is one of the oldest family names in Mecklenburg County. Springs, that's the family that married into the Myers, and they were originally from South Carolina. And the Van Landinghams, we all know their estate. Their original home was in Uptown, and then they moved to where it is now on Plaza Midwood. Vance was named for Zebulon Vance, and Wilkes was named for John Wilkes. He had a factory nearby. It was a Mecklenburg Iron Works, and it was just right off of Trade Street from their home. It must have smelled abysmally around there those days. And here's some more landowners. And I'll just give you a chance to look over those if you have any questions about any of those folks.
I do have a question about Margaret Wallace, because I used to live on Wallace Road, which is near Margaret Wallace Road. And I did live on Wallace Road. Who was Margaret Wallace?
She was a landowner and farmer, and she had a large plot of land right out there. And about the time they were developing that area, a lot of times either the city, it all depends on who was building the road, but the city or the developers would name it after. But usually what they did was because it was so familiar. Oh, you just go down Sam Newell's Road just by his house and you can't miss it, that kind of thing. And that's probably, and it just retained those that name. And then like the Johnson Dairy, you just go up to Johnson's Dairy and turn right. And it probably would have was a dirt road, but eventually it became a paved road. And that had the continuity. You'll see cemetery roads. I threw Cloninger in there because that's my grandmother's maiden name.
So I would like to know about Papa Joe.
Now, that was the one I was saying, please don't anyone ask me about because
Uh-oh.
Oh, oh no.
but hold on, let me get back there. Oops, here we go.
Nope, went too far.
There it is.
Oh, Papa Joe Hendricks Boulevard. I think he's the guy who's related to Hendricks, the automobile folks, and he was their patriarch.
Gotcha. I just noticed the Papa Joe.
Yeah, you noticed that right off, and but I just thought that was so funny when I was going down looking for odd names for my program, and I thought that's a good one. Again, these are forgotten places. Mills, grist mills were vital to farmers because they had to grind their corn so they could sell the cornmeal and also maintain enough for their family to bake with. And sometimes they were flour mills. And these are just some of the farms and stores. A lot of times like the Kiesler store or Nick's Tavern, he owned a tavern. But the store was a mainstay and still is in a lot of small communities where they still exist. But that's where people picked up their mail. They could do some banking. They could do even maybe borrow some money, based on their goods and swap goods out. And the harness shop road, someone making a harness, that would have been a very important thing back then. But mostly they were farms and mills. Alexandriana, that's it's sort of near Mint Hill, and that was a little community down there. And we had an old McDonald who had a farm.
Is the Croft Mill up in North Charlotte, up over off Harris Boulevard?
Yes, it is. It's up in the Croft little town. That was a little
That's
area known as Croft.
Just the same Croft as there was a store over there too.
We have a picture of the Croft School too. A lot of times these names got their name from the store owner, the communities got their name from the store owner or a large landowner.
You didn't list the Davises of Davis Lake, did you?
Probably, sorry.
No, we actually met, we're both actuaries, and we were talking to a man named Davis who lived in Greensboro, and we said we lived in Davis Lake at the time. And he's like, oh, really? That's my family's land.
Small world.
Yeah.
Now, this is what sometimes you'll go down the road and you'll see the word old in front of it. This just telling you this was the main thoroughfare. And a lot of times they've been replaced. Old Concord Road, it's in Newell, and it's a great old Concord Road that will take you straight into Concord, but nowadays we take 85. Camden Road, of course, took you to Camden, South Carolina. Lawyers Road took you to Anson County's courthouse. That's the route that the lawyers from Mecklenburg County would take to go all the way down to Anson County. Old Mine Road, I'm assuming there was a gold mine because we had lots. We had like 60 some odd gold mines in the county at one time. And so again, all of these are just Old Nations Ford. That's just a Native American, the Old Nation. And there was a ford in the road, so they just named it that. But as you can see, most of these haven't. The Rosells Ferry, that was the main way to get across the Catawba. There were lots of ferries up and down the Catawba River until the bridges were built. And that's how you got where you needed to go. And so I always like seeing these and trying to imagine them not being paved, but, as dirt roads with stagecoaches, and knowing that that's the route that, hundreds of years ago, that's the route people would take going from Charlotte. And I just think it's really neat. Now, this little neighborhood is near UNC Charlotte, and some friends, and I was taking a colleague home, and she lived on Joyce Kilmer Drive. And it just cracked me up that they had these long names for these famous authors, mostly British, a few Americans in there. So I just thought that was really cute. And a large number of Native American tribes, for the most part, they are North Carolinians, except for the Delaware and the Chickasaw and the Cheyenne. But most of these tribes at one time or another were in North Carolina. The Tuscaroras, there's a few left, but the majority of them moved north and merged with the Oneida tribe after the Tuscarora Wars of 1711, I believe it was. Very bloody war. But a lot of our creeks and rivers get their names from these native tribes. And this one kind of blew my mind. Well, I knew I live off of Falmouth. So I thought that was hilarious because that was an encampment for the Union troops during the Civil War. So I started looking around for some other Civil War names, and lo and behold, we have streets and roads named after these Civil War sites. Go figure. Except I like the name Shenandoah, that's pretty. And then North Carolina cities pop up. So I'll let you look through that little list.
You've tried.
Biltmore is just a little bit of a village outside of Asheville. Cades Cove is now part of the Blue Ridge National Park, and it's not a community anymore. And yes, we do have a Plymouth and an Oxford, North Carolina.
Dallas, North Carolina seems kind of fun.
Which one?
Dallas, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. I just thought this was just a kid, just cracks. I'm amused, but it doesn't take much to amuse me, as you can tell. Whoops, I had that in there twice. Oh, I was supposed to delete that because I had to clean that page up. And then we have states, streets named after states. I don't know why. I don't know if people just ran out of imagination or what.
I was wondering, I'm sure the roads are not taking us to California from here.
No. And back in the days before the train, you literally got on a boat and you had to go around South America to get to California. It was quite a journey. If you really wanted gold and those there hills, you really had to make the trip. Or sometimes they would cut through Mexico and come up in that way. But those could be arduous and dangerous because people would catch diseases on the ships. So here we come to the big question. Why do so many streets have similar names? Because there was no law that prevented that. And so around 1950, the chief of police and the chief of fire department, Donald Charles and Frank Littlejohn, well, they'd had about enough. Because can you imagine you're a fireman and you've got to go put a fire out, and someone tells you it's A Street, but there's 4 different A streets, or it's all the fire's on Country Club Drive and there's 2 streets named that, 5 roads named Forest, 7 roads named Park, 2 were Pine Street. So in one neighborhood, there were 4 intersections of Greenwood and Glenwood going in 4 different directions. So the planning committee met and proposed changing the names of 195 streets, if you can imagine, that had the same or a very similar name. And now it's just that, and since that time they passed a law and developers just cannot use a name already in use, not even if it's just phonetically similar.
Is that in the city, or that's in the city or the county?
Well, it was the city, and I'm probably sure this was in 1950, and I'm pretty sure they sent that out to the county as well. But you had more problems with the city because this was, the city fire. This was before there was consolidation of the city and county governments. That didn't happen till a little bit after 1950.
I was just wondering, as they annex places into the county, they might I mean, into the city, they might pull in some streets they didn't
Yeah.
have before and make duplicates.
It could be trouble. I don't know. But that's one of the reasons why there were so many streets with Sharon and Sharon Amity. Oops, where'd you go?
That's end of slideshow.
Okay, and that's the end of the slide. That's right. I always end up with this because I always say. So does anyone have any questions or concerns?
About the College Street, you showed College Street at one point, and I think the college that you were talking about, that's on Elizabeth.
No, it's a different college.
Or is
It's
it
not
different one?
CPCC.
What are we talking about?
What was the college that College Street was named for?
Oh, Presbyterian College. And let's see. Hold on just a second. Let me go out of this. Don't know if I can do this. If you go to our website at cmstory.org and look up in the image collection under Presbyterian College, it will show you a picture of the college. It was just pretty much one building. It later became apartments, and now, yeah, it's still, the lot is empty. Lots of pretty trees, but and there you can see some steps, and that's about it.
Can you tell us more about the Beatty family?
The Beatty family pretty much owned a lot of land up in the northwest and northwestern part of the county. They were farmers for the most part, but they made a lot of their money because they owned a ferry. And they would ferry people across the Catawba River, and to get to the other side of the county was the fastest route.
This is Joe. Ruth's grandfather rode into Charlotte when there was all dirt roads in the late 1800s.
Oh yeah, they had something called
Beatty.
macadam road, and they would pave it with some sort of, it was an ingredient, it was kind of like rocks and sort of a tabby kind of mixture, and they paved the roads that way because, you know, until the age of the automobile, North Carolina did not really need, you know, good, strong, there just wasn't, there was the need, but they just didn't build the good roads. And that did not come until, of course, Cameron Morrison, all that he was, but he was known as the Good Roads Governor, and he built a lot and constructed a lot of major highways, major thoroughfares. I wouldn't call them highways.
So if there's a street named after W.T. Harris, why isn't there a street named after Teeter?
Go figure. There may be, but I just didn't see it. I see a finger. Do you have a question, Mr. Allen? I kept seeing a finger go by.
Oh,
Is
yeah,
it true
you have to Roebuck either. So.
Excuse
Is
me?
it true they
Didn't
paved
name
the
anything
outpass?
after Roebuck either.
Oh.
Roebuck was forgotten. Sears and Roebuck.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well,
Harris-
Pfeiffer Street, if you're familiar with Pfeiffer Street, that was the home of James, I think James Pfeiffer. Anyway, Pfeiffer was it's where the old Sears and Roebuck Hal Marshall building is. And the Pfeiffer home was the last site of the last meeting of the Confederate cabinet. They stopped here on their way. And then some of them kind of ventured off into different places. And then they went a little bit further and had another last meeting of the Confederate cabinet. And then some of those members, but this was the last full cabinet member. Do you have a question?
So back to the Harris Teeter though, Teeter supermarkets and Harris supermarkets, it says they merged in 1959. So I bet the road names, at least the basic road names, were already existing before that.
That area really didn't emerge until about the 50s when they started building out UNC Charlotte.
But at one point before we moved here, I thought, was the east part of Harris Boulevard here first? You know, there's East W.T. Harris that goes over to UNC Charlotte, and to the east.
Right.
And now it keeps on going all the way over to 77.
Yeah,
I think
it just
that part's
that
newer.
part of the area was farmland. All of that was farmland. Where UNC Charlotte is, where IKEA is,
Oh, yeah.
all of that area was just farmland. If you go up
But
northern
east of
part of
there, it was a little more, I think east of there, it was a little more settled than it was west of there. Is that
oh
true?
yeah, yeah.
So that's what I thought. The road, Harris Boulevard, actually started from over there and then later expanded to the western part.
I don't know his history. You know, sort of 1950s is my cutoff period for Charlotte history, but for some things, and because I sort of merge into women history and African American history, so I sort of kind of leave that. But I had to do some research for Tom Hanchett about W.T. Harris on this little block of streets where he had all these little grocery stores, because before we had these large grocery store conglomerates, we had small little grocery stores that were family run. There was usually one on every corner in uptown Charlotte, because a lot of people lived in uptown Charlotte. And the same thing with Central Avenue. You would have like 2 or 3 grocery stores on that one where all those little buildings are on Central Avenue, just up above where the Dairy Queen is, where Nova Bakery is. Those were little grocery stores.
Well, and probably people didn't have cars that much, right? People who lived
Yeah, they did have, they had to pay to have the, they weren't connected with the 4Cs trolleys. So that the people who built up that area had to pay to have their own trolley system put in. But yeah, it was that Plaza Midwood was probably the first automobile kind of development. Dilworth and Myers Park, of course, had plenty of access, and Elizabeth neighborhood had plenty of access to the trolley.
You mentioned we had a lot of gold mines here.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the rich people of the past that you mentioned, they were rich because of the land, or were they rich because of the mines?
Well, the thing of it is, in Mecklenburg County, and as well as a lot of other counties, it's not well known that there were all these gold mines. In the uptown part of Charlotte, what is it now, uptown Charlotte, you had the St. Catherine mine and I know this like the back of my head, and the Rudisill mine. And those mines were so deep, they brought in Cornish miners to mine it. We're talking in the early 1800s. And this continued on up until about the turn of the century. And then the ore was so expensive to get out that it became not feasible. But there was a doctor, James McCombs, and he leased the Reed Gold Mine. So we have all these papers, and it talks about the problems with the mines, the equipment. But that's one of the things that helped Charlotte grow, was because we needed people to supply these miners in terms of, leather, wood, food, you name it, candles, any kinds of equipment like that. And then as the railroad came in the 1850s, it was really a great connection for farmers, because they would, the train would stop, they would load their goods and take it in, and they'd get money exchanged. So all of these things help Charlotte and Mecklenburg County in general have a very diverse economy.
Isn't that why they had the mint there originally, because of the gold?
Yes, the mint was because people were bringing in their gold, and they have to, what they do these chemicals, and they do an assay report to determine how much gold may or may not be in a mine, or how much gold that you bring in, how much gold is gold per se than fool's gold or some other mineral. And by the time of the Civil War, it was just an assay office. They were not minting coins. If you ever come across one, hold on to it, because it's worth a whole lot of money.
So are any of those mines still around as museums, say, or something like that?
Only the Reed mine out in Cabarrus County, which was originally Mecklenburg County, but at the time, when it was first formed. But No, most of them are in very isolated places. There's one family, they discovered their house was on top of the gold mine. So when they were doing some excavation of their basement, they have this long shaft in their basement that goes to nowhere. And when they were building the new convention center, you could see the tunnels and the tracks that they would have used for the carts. I noticed that when they were building it, and those were the tunnels that would have taken you down into the mine. There's some images, you can look them up. Harper's Weekly, and it shows, and it was basically straight down shafts. And then later they had these crisscross shafts. And that's why some people like to say that the streets of Charlotte are paved in gold, maybe gold dust, but you know. But I don't know. There were some people who did get wealthy. It also brought people in. It also created a need for banks and banking. And because Charlotte has always been a place that drew people from other areas to make their fortune. A lot of the people who established drugstores at the turn of the century, they made their money in that, and then they went into banking and became some of the most prominent people in the town. And that's pretty much how the history of the city is people coming here to make their fortune and building up the city as they did.
Still seems to be. It's more transient than most cities. There's
yes, that's our history.
There's almost everything's apartments. There's very few condos and townhouses in Uptown. It's all apartments, and everything new is apartments.
I don't understand that either, because, well, I mean, I understand it for the transient part, but eventually people want to settle down, and I know people who like living uptown. I wouldn't mind living uptown. I just can't afford to live uptown.
Well, during the day.
Oh, no, it's not bad.
Well,
it depends on where you're at.
To some extent.
Yes, yes. But there's always going to be problemos. Any other questions?
So many of the creeks that you said they have been paved over or like filled up, are they like, do they have a starting and ending points?
Yeah, they'll have pipes. Not when I say cover up, I mean they pipe them and then they build roads over them.
So the creeks are still flowing under it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like like Sugar Creek. You know, there's parts of it that are open, and then there's parts of it you drive over. So because there's bridges or pipes or something like that. But then there's some smaller creeks, especially down in the southern part, that have just been piped up. That then pipes connect them and make them flow, and people build on top of them. That would be interesting.
So Denise, do you actually see Briar Creek somewhere near your house?
What?
Speaking to Denise.
Oh.
Do I what?
Can you actually see Briar Creek
Do you know
anywhere?
where Briar Creek is, or just Briar Creek Road?
Yes, I believe so. No, you can, because Central Avenue crosses it.
So there is a place where you actually
Briar Creek
water?
does. Yeah.
No, I think Central does too.
I'm trying to think where Central and Mallard cross.
But some of the creek names can be really confusing because some of these creeks are very long.
Oh yeah, like the Dutch Buffalo Creek starts up in Cabarrus County and flows all the way, south.
Yeah,
Everything's
have a road named for it here and a road named for it there, and you can't figure out how the roads so far apart have the same name.
Well, you just kind of have to look at the map because there's lots of fingerlings, what I call creeks and fingerlings, and they just all sort of connect and join, trying to get, I guess, to Charleston. I don't know. No, none of our rivers connect to the Charleston River. That was the problem with North Carolina and settling North Carolina is our creeks do not flow east to west. They flow north to south. So when people wanted to exchange goods, it was really hard for people in the West to get their goods. It was easier for them to go down the road to go down to Charleston or go up to Pennsylvania than it was to go across the state. And it still is, because if you've ever tried to get to Wilmington in under 4 hours, that is just not going to happen.
But they have
By the
that really
crossing.
hopeful sign that 774 or whatever is going to be interstate soon, right?
I've been living for that day. I'm pretty sure my great nephews will be grown and have married and children of their own before I get to enjoy that fast little drive to Wilmington.
Well, it might happen because we thought 485 was never going to finish the little piece that we needed. We live right here where it ended before.
Yeah, I remember
Travel
that.
to the other gap, the other side, and we thought it would never happen.
Well, they also said Hawthorne Bridge was going to open in August. That's the joke around uptown, is because all my colleagues, we all live in sort of the Plaza Midwood area, and the running joke is about Hawthorne. You can walk across it, just don't drive. I don't know where Hawthorne Lane came from. I would assume when the Myers family was developing that, and they're the Presbyterian Church. I have no idea. Queens Road, of course, got its name from the Queen. And no, Queen Charlotte never rode down Queens Road West. I did have that question once.
I thought the Queens Road came because there was a necklace there. The Queens Road looks like a necklace.
Yeah, but I don't think that was just the idea. I just think it just sort of became that way.
Maybe I missed it, but what about Sharon?
Sharon?
Did we miss that?
Yeah, I talked about Sharon. It's from the Rose of Sharon.
Oh,
And
that's
the biblical name. And prior to 1950, you could use Sharon, and you could have used it. You could have had a Sharon Road in north, south, west, or east Charlotte, and it would not have mattered. But developers associated it with wealth, and so they kept naming the roads after Sharon because that was considered South Charlotte and a very popular area.
All right, guys, I'm probably gonna have to go. It was fun. Miss Bumgarner, always fun to hear you talk about roads and stuff. But I have a student event going on in about 6 minutes, so I'm gonna head out.
Hi, well, I'm through. And thank you for coming. And I hope you all have a good night. It's time for Washington Week in about 6 minutes. I always like to watch that, catch up on what's going on in the world. But I'm glad to be with you guys again, and just send me a notice and I'll take that Mensa test. I don't have anything to do besides try that.
The next one is November 21st.
Okay.
Up in the university area. So.
Oh, you have to go up there? And
well, we just had the last one down at the Crown Plaza Executive Park Drive. So we've been trying to switch it around. But okay. We'll probably have it someplace else in December. But.
Well, UNC is not that far from me. Yeah. But it's always a pleasure to be with you folks. Sorry it's not in person, but it's better to be safe, and I hope you all are safe. And if I don't see you before too long, have a great Thanksgiving, great Christmas, great Hanukkah, great
Kwanzaa.
Kwanzaa, thank you. I'm saying it was on the tip of my tongue. I could visualize it. I've been this way all day.